We center them in everything we do, and it's an honor and a privilege to be here today with you. Our work is very simple. We're trying to create a world a just world. I think we're a little bit past talking about equality. I think we talk a lot about equity, but really we should be marching towards justice, a just and fair world for every person, period. And that is what we do at Supermajority. I'm grateful to be joined by some incredible leaders on the stage. We have a lot to go over today because 2024 has been 2024ing. And I'm so honored to have these amazing leaders to talk about their experiences, to share what they're hearing from the ground, but also to ask a question that continues to be asked, is like why people are not interested, especially this cycle. But I don't want us to focus necessarily on what's happening in 2024, because this is a continual issue. I have been doing this since I was 18 years old. That's a long time. Don't do the math, because it'll make you cry. But the one thing that I have found over and over again, it's hard to get people to turn out when you come to them in September. And it's hard to get them to turn out when you don't talk about the issues that matter to them, when you pay them lip service. And it's hard to get them to turn out when you just don't engage, and when you look at a government that doesn't always represent you. So today, this panel is going to unpack a lot of these questions. We're going to probably use up the entire time. But before I begin, I want to take a moment to give flowers and honor to our panelists and introduce them. So to my immediate right is Abbas Alawai. Abbas is a Michigan-based senior Democratic strategist, go Michigan. I'm not from Michigan, but I've been told I'm an official Michigander, so. And is the director of the Uncommitted National Movement. Beside Abbas is Sarita Fontanesi, Texas, is an integrated voter engagement director at Unite for Reproductive and Gender Equity, also known as URGE. She is currently based in Austin, Texas. She has a master's in macro social work from the University of Southern California and is a podcaster. Ooh, very millennial.
Thank you.
And finally, we have Emily Slatko. Emily is a seasoned organizer and a communication strategist with over 10 years of experience in politics. She began her work on the 2012 campaign, Obama-Biden. I was there. Yes. We survived at the age of 18. She's currently the communications director for Next Gen America. Thank you all so much for joining us. And so now I'm going to try to ground us in where we are. But I really don't think I have to ground us because we kind of know. All of us in this room know that it's no secret that voters of all ages and backgrounds just don't have enthusiasm this year. But I would say that's every year and every election, because there seems to be like a growing disconnect. I could talk about the first presidential debate that was held in June, but I'm not, because I think it's continuing. Instead of talking about things that are happening every day, we're still talking about this episode. Meanwhile, we have issues that are happening. My home state of Texas is underwater. That should be on the national news. We have issues with SCOTUS. That should be on the national news. Rehashing a debate that we all saw and scratching our heads, no. And just for the record, I don't know what a black job is either. So we are stuck with, so what can leaders do when crucial voting blocs do not believe in the politicians truly represent them and feel that neither candidate will make meaningful change on the things that matter to them? And there's only one answer: earn the vote. It's that simple. Earn the vote. But it seems very, very complicated. I wonder why. So this morning, we're going to uncover what is possible. I hope you will go along with us. I hope you will learn a lot. I hope you will take notes, because note takers are history makers. And I hope that you leave this energized and ready to engage with the organization and the people within your network as you hear from these amazing leaders as they share. All right. So our first question is going to be a doozy, because I'm going to tell you right now, economics was not my favorite in college, but we're going to start with it. This first question is for anyone, So time and time again, we see voters across age and demographics express that their top concern is economic well-being. And for communities of color, especially for young voters who were feeling that crunch when they head to the grocery store, when they are trying to even rent and find housing, student loans, hello, and who are really struggling to make ends meet while also bearing the burden, again, of student loans. What does the economic well-being look like? And what should candidates do, or what should they be saying to address when it comes to rising costs? So,
Sure. Hi. Sarita Fontanesi, pronoun she, her. I think it's funny, I actually was talking to my therapist about this yesterday. Shocking. In that young people in particular have to define what economic well-being means to them on an individual basis, right? We are well past the days of a house and 2.5 kids and one job for forever and a pension, right? Like those things don't exist. And if we keep trying to make the impossible possible, that's how we burn out. That's how we end up in those deep pits of despair. And so getting really salient on what matters to you as an individual and what does comfort and joy mean to you, and what do you need to be able to make that happen? Like, you know, I live in Texas, and having a fully functioning air conditioning right now and being able to afford that is economic well-being for me, right? But getting really clear on what matters, what is important, what adds to your quality of life, and then also acknowledging that the vast majority of jobs right now are not meeting that need. And so, like Jara was saying, you know, the cost of eggs, of rent, of everything are going up. And so when we can't even meet our basics, then like we don't have any sense of well-being. And so I think that's a big part of what young people in particular are looking to shift in November and beyond.
Absolutely, I would agree wholeheartedly. And I'd also add that we've seen over the past couple of years in particular, young people really taking hold of what economic opportunity looks like in unionization efforts. You know, I think we've seen Starbucks workers making phenomenal gains, and that is a long fight that they have been up against. And we're seeing this with Amazon Labor Union, you know, partnering with major unions like SEIU, or I apologize, the Teamsters. But this is something that we are seeing growing, and it's young people taking hold of their power in their workplaces as well, and demanding from major corporations with billionaire CEOs who are doing just fine that they also deserve a fair share. They deserve to work one job instead of 5. They deserve reasonable hours. They deserve AC in their working environments and lunch breaks and things along those lines. And I think that is a way that we've seen the kind of grassroots movement show up in this like call for economic opportunity and growth as well.
Good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here with you all. I'm so grateful to be with my fellow panelists, grateful to you, Jara, and to Supermajority for pulling us together, for creating space in this moment where just before this, Jara said, you guys, we got to be ready because news might break at any moment about SCOTUS, about POTUS, about any of it, and we're trying to process a very difficult moment together, and so I'm grateful for the space. I think about economic well-being you know, as an immigrant kid. I think of economic well-being as someone who grew up with, you know, relying on some of our social safety net to survive. I also think about economic well-being as someone who went on to become a congressional staffer. I worked for incredible members of Congress, including some of my favorites like Congressman Andy Levin and Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, and most recently as Congresswoman Cori Bush's chief of staff. And the idea of well-being is it's not just like a feeling that you arrive at, like, and it's not an endpoint. It has to be, you know, the entirety of the environment we're existing in. And one of the things that I was surprised by when I was a congressional staffer was figuring out that the way that the sausage is made is actually like really, really awful. That our best and greatest institutions have capacity to do great good and also have the capacity to make policy out of harming and killing people like us, people like me. And so to me, I was surprised to learn when I went to work in Congress that every year the president makes a request to Congress of, hey, here's how much money I need. And every year the Pentagon makes that request alongside the government's budget saying, hey, here's how much money we want. And every time the Pentagon, which will ask for way more money than they need and doesn't get audited in the way that you would imagine, and there isn't as much accountability or transparency as we might need as people for whom most of our, like a lot of our tax dollars are going to just like limitless wars. Every year, the Pentagon will say, we want this much, and Congress will be like, we know you asked for a lot of money. We're going to give you even more than what you asked for. And every year, that money, that difference, that delta of like how much more money they're giving to the Pentagon than the Pentagon even asked for, that money could address the unhoused crisis 2 times over in our entire country for that year. And so well-being, economic well-being at an individual level also has to do with us being able to look at how our government is spending our money and understanding that our government is investing in things that give life rather than investing in destruction, rather than investing in perpetuating harm. And so well-being also has to do with priorities. Are we investing in the things that give people life, or are we investing in destruction and harm? That needs to be part of our discussion here today.
I think that's great, and the thing that I'm pulling out of that is like quality of life is about more than what's happening to me, because I like to say I am my sister's keeper, but I also can relate. I'm a working class kid. Like nobody gave me anything. The fact that I'm on this stage right now is because my parents, my daddy, literally died working every single day. But I shouldn't be, and that's considered a success story, but it shouldn't be, right? Having air conditioning is important. It isn't. It's these smaller things that we are consistently talking about. So as we're talking about an economy that works for us and the idea of quality of life, it comes down to right now, I don't know if you all feel that, but do you ever sense that like folks just want their basic needs met? And are you seeing that?
The bar is in hell, and somehow we are still tripping over it. And I think a lot of the tension that we are feeling, that as it's getting amplified, is over this fact that we are asking for the true bare minimum, and even that is a struggle for more and more people to get. We've talked about how the pandemic really put a very bright light on the huge gaps in our systems of care and in our safety nets. And as more and more people are still reeling from the effects of COVID, which still very much exists, right? More and more people are finding that they can't return back to working 3, 4, 5 jobs just to keep the lights on because of the effects of long COVID, or because of maybe health issues that they had unrelated to COVID, but put them at a higher risk, right? And so when we cannot get those basic bare minimum needs met, we cannot think about and envision and imagine what does true liberation look like, because you're just thinking about survival. And that's how these systems of power thrive, right? They keep us distracted from envisioning what a more just and more equitable and liberated world looks like, because we're just trying to figure out where our next meal, our next roof is gonna be at, right? And so again, until we address this gap in just the bare minimum, it is so much harder to ask people to think about, well, what could be, what is possible, when it's like, I don't even know if tomorrow's possible.
I think at first I was kind of like, I don't know if we want to start with this, but I think we absolutely do, because we're talking about what is a quality of life. And that is something that everybody is thinking about right now. Like our basic needs are not being taken care of. It should not be that most folks are one paycheck away from being unhoused. That's a reality. It is the fact that people, again, in my home state are underwater in 100-degree weather, and they're slowly restoring the power. But if you're like me, who lives kind of in a rural area, your power is like going out anytime it wants to, and you're just kind of stuck. These are basic needs. And then to hear that we have this budget that's not even asked for, And it's almost like a blank check that gets written. And that money can be used. So as we're talking about this, I think maybe we need to shift the narrative around economic security to being our basic quality of life where every person's basic needs are met. Because if the bar is in hell, let's try to figure out a way to raise it just a little bit. Sarita, I'm going to stay with you for a second because we just celebrated the 2-year anniversary. I don't want to call it an anniversary, but 2 years since SCOTUS decided to overturn Roe versus Wade and end the constitutional right to abortion. And since then, like a lot of people predicted, Black women, they are attacking IVF. They are attacking basically everything that has to do with our reproductive freedom. And then we also have a federal abortion ban that is being outlined in Project 2025. If you have not read Project 2025, I highly suggest that you do. It is 900 pages.
Ugh.
I am on page 320. I'm not kidding. Highly recommend you read it. But I do want to ask, what can leaders do to take meaningful action? And like meaningful, not lip service. Going back to that idea of our quality of life, our basic needs. Healthcare is a basic need. And what are voters looking for on that issue?
Yeah, you know, Texas is my home state, and it is where Roe v. Wade started, Dallas. And I also work in Ohio, Alabama, and Georgia. And the stark contrast, right, between like Texas and Ohio, in November, Ohio passed Issue 1, which codified reproductive rights in their state constitution. And that's a really great example of what lawmakers can do outside of the federal government. I get that people, especially young people, are talking about how it's not just a lesser of two evils when it comes to the top of the ticket, right? That neither choice feels remotely good. I absolutely hear and honestly can't really disagree with that personally. And also have to recognize in the conversation that I have often is when there's rot at the top, nothing can get done the rest of the way down. And so, yes, I'm frustrated. I am exhausted and tired by the top of the ticket right now as well. And also, for a state like Ohio to have the power to be able to codify reproductive rights in their state constitution is infinitely more possible in a climate that's not Project 2025, right? And so, one, I encourage everyone, please vote the entire way down your ticket and really learn what those offices are and how they affect your day-to-day life, speaking of quality of life, right? Like your comptroller or your tax assessor, which is a vestige of voting taxes, which is a vestige of slavery, like that is an elected office and they have immediate impact on how much your property taxes are, which even if you rent, you're paying for those property taxes, right? They decide who has access to easily accessible elections, right? And so our lawmakers coming back to reproductive rights, what can they do in a meaningful way regardless of maybe what is happening at the federal level? Of course, the federal government could codify reproductive rights on a federal level, and that would really solve a lot of these problems. But that is a bigger process, right? And on that local level, we can have DAs that we elect who choose not to prosecute people seeking reproductive care regardless of state law. We have healthcare workers who decide to follow the oath that they took when they became a healthcare worker regardless of what a regime decides, right? And so those are the things that I think we have to keep in mind and keep in context. And for me, those are the things that are the most motivating because again, it impacts my day-to-day life rather than these big systems that can feel really overwhelming and out of touch.
Thank you. I'm going to shift gears again because, Abbas, you started talking about the defense budget, and we know right now that we have conflict that's happening in the world, and we know that that is impacting folks right here at home. And we know, I'm trying not to grand scheme because I want to give you the space to share. But as we move toward the party conventions, the work that you did on the uncommitted vote campaign, as we move toward the party conventions and this nomination process for each candidate, what's next? And more importantly, what are voters and what are the community looking for when it comes to Palestine?
I'm a progressive through and through. I have been in progressive spaces for a long time. For a long time, getting asked a question about Palestine specifically was even taboo. And so I appreciate the question, Jara, and I know that there are organizers in the room, and in this moment of the mass killing of Palestinians, of Palestinian civilians, of Palestinian children, I need to start answering that question by saying something, and if you feel it too, I want you to say it back. Free Palestine.
Free Palestine.
Free Palestine. I'm not Palestinian. Unlike our current president, if I were called a Palestinian as a disparaging term during a presidential debate, I would take issue with that. I would speak about how offensive it is that as a people are being killed by the thousands, the mere mention of them is used as a slur among two people who are so far out of touch with the pain that people in Palestine are feeling and with the pain that people right here in our country are feeling about how unacceptable it is for our tax dollars to be used to kill children by the thousands. And so I come from Michigan. I come from a community in Dearborn, Michigan, where I unfortunately share a specific expertise with a lot of my community members. And that is the expertise of knowing what it's like to survive US-funded bombs. I was a child in Lebanon in 2006, and I had to make sense of why it is that my own government was trying to kill kids like me. Why it is that the bombs that were raining down on me, that I could feel and smell and taste in my mouth when the debris in the room that we were staying in got to be so much that I could not see my hand in front of me, why it was that my government was doing this. And so I'm also an Arab American connected to a community where right now, what's happening overseas, what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in the West Bank, what's happening in South Lebanon, where my grandmother and my aunts are calling me day after day saying, Abbas, the bombs are raining all around us. I'm sleeping with my slippers under my pillow. That way, in case the bomb hits, I have something on my feet when I run. For so many of us, Arab Americans in particular, but not just Arab Americans and Muslim Americans, young people, voters of color, voters of conscience, anti-war people, women in our country are watching mass atrocities unfold live streamed on our phones and are in touch with the pain because we see our own humanity in the humanity of Palestinians being killed using our tax dollars. And we're trying to get our government to do something different than it's doing. So it's because we were in touch with that pain that people in Michigan came together and said, we're going to use the Democratic presidential primary as a way of trying to get through to President Biden that, hey, there isn't just an enthusiasm gap here. People feel deeply betrayed. You're killing our families. You're killing our families. And unfortunately, this part of our foreign policy is not Democratic policy or Republican policy. This is US government policy. If a Democrat's in there, if a Republican's in there, this is what we do to people over there. We kill them ruthlessly. And so we came up with a strategy because we're also people who are capable of carrying the nuance, okay? I am someone who does not need to be convinced how dangerous Donald Trump was and is. I was in the Capitol on January 6th. I know that his people, that the white supremacists he sent to the Capitol would have loved to harm and kill people like me and my boss. So it was through that pain that we came up with a strategy so that I could re-engage a conversation with my own cousins who, prior to October, weren't reached out to by the Democratic Party at all, didn't feel connected, felt disillusioned, and after October felt like, oh my God, Biden is funding this. And there's no way I'll vote for any Democrat, Abbas. What are you talking about? How bad could it get? Lesser of two evils, what could be worse than a genocide? This is what my cousins are telling me. And so we came up with a strategy of saying, we need to give people something to vote for. Yes. President Biden, if you want to demonstrate meaningfully that you are in touch with the pain that this community is feeling, you need to change your policy. And we're not asking for policy change that's unreasonable, we're just asking you to stop funding the killing of our family. And so, when we're talking about these big policy issues, when we're talking about policing in America and the persistent killing of black folks in our country, and of black men in particular, of people of color, our communities are not experiencing these as far away issues. Our communities are experiencing these issues in our bodies. This is not a foreign policy issue to me. I have nightmares about being in the buildings that are bombed nightly, because I feel that in my body. And so, what we're doing now is we have to keep the pressure up. We have to hold both. We have to tell the truth about what Donald Trump and his white supremacist buddies have planned. And we have to ensure that he never gets anywhere near the White House. But that work cannot be done instead of talking about Palestine, instead of talking about the need for policy change that ensures that we implement an arms embargo that does not continue killing Palestinians without conditions, killing Palestinians without consequence. And so we need to give people something to vote for. As a result of our movement, our uncommitted movement, over 730,000 people voted uncommitted around the country, including in key swing states, as a vote for peace and against war. Our hope now is that the president still, now, today, changes his policy so that we can get out the vote in communities that feel betrayed by him and say, hey, listen, he didn't just change his language. Now he says ceasefire. He didn't say it before our movement. Now he says ceasefire, but he's still giving more and more bombs hand over fist. And so if you change your policy, then we can re-engage in a productive conversation. But you got to stop killing us with impunity.
So I'm going to kind of use a point of privilege here, and this is a time for all of us. Because what's happening to one community is happening to all of us. And as a black woman, I know for a fact that the traumas that my ancestors felt is in me. I feel it in every part of me. I don't have to go anywhere. I can go to my doctor who tells me.
Right.
Listen.
Right.
But what I want to say is we should not have to wait for marginalized people to bear their soul and their pain for our consumption to want to do something.
Yes.
I'm going to say that again. We should not wait for marginalized people to bear their soul and their pain for our consumption to want to do something. Because I am beginning to see it. Because in 2020, everyone had a black square on their Instagram. Oh, I don't think y'all are ready.
We came to the right panel.
All right.
I come from preachers and teachers. You know, and my dad was a labor worker, so I grew up in these streets. But I will say that what happens is we shouldn't just assume that things have been resolved just because something is no longer on our screens, or because we're talking about what's happening, because things are going to continue to happen. The fact of the matter is that there are children who are starving to death.
Listen.
There are families who are being torn apart. And it should not take people getting in front of an audience and begging for you to see their humanity. And if that is where we have come as a society, we are broken. And that as an organizer, you let that drop and leave the silence, but I feel like this is a challenge. We need to be challenged to do better and to do more. So just because we don't see it on our social media, because everybody's consumed by whatever is the popular thing for the week, these things are still happening. The bare minimum of what I heard is I'm asking for a dialogue. And if you're unwilling to have a dialogue, how then can you come back and ask me to vote? And that is what this entire panel is about. Folks should not have to beg for a dialogue, and we should not have to beg for our humanity.
Right.
So thank you, I see you, I hear you, and I am sorry that you have had to bare your soul, but I hope that right now people will hear you and they will start paying attention again, because we're gonna have the political news cycle. But right now, children are hungry and they are seeing this and they are watching, and every generation is called to do something. My question to you is, are you gonna turn an eye and turn away? Are you going to do something about it? Quite frankly, not in our name. Do not do to this movement what we did to Black Lives Matter in 2020, where it was a black square, everybody patted themselves on the back and said, good day, because we're paying for it now, every single day. I'm gonna take back the term woke, because Barbara Lee is the one who created that term. Stay woke.
Yeah.
Okay. Point of privilege over.
Thank you, Trevor.
I don't know how to transition to this, but I think climate justice is a form of justice that goes back to that quality of life.
Yeah.
We were just talking about Michigan and all of the issues that are happening with water and clean water, clean air. When it comes to our future, specifically protecting the environment is a non-negotiable. And this isn't just an American issue, this is an international issue. Because we're gonna continue to have conflicts as long as people are having to scrounge to survive. And that's a reality. So what do young voters expect leaders to do to tackle that issue?
More, but that's the short answer. The long answer is the climate crisis is at our door. I'm in Florida. I live in Florida, was born and raised there. Hurricanes have been getting worse and worse every year. And it seems like every cycle that passes, you're like, ooh, we dodged mass destruction, but that landed somewhere else. And I know Houston had over 2 million people without power, and I'm sure was followed by record heat. So the call is now, it was yesterday, it was decades ago. And I think to the general youth movement, it's focusing on those issues, the issues that impact our today, the issues that impact our tomorrow. That's climate justice, that's abortion care, that's equity and equality for all, and having a fair shot at a successful life. And I think climate is one of those that kind of touches so many different areas, whether it's your access to housing and being in that flood zone, or your access to afford your high energy bills for your AC or for your heat, or even just being able to hold the massive corporations that are controlling all of our, electricity and basic essentials accountable, and making sure that they're not walking away with billion-dollar checks, and that we are able to support ourselves, and that we're able to be safe in our own homes, really. And I think that's continuing to mobilize, to organize, to call on our leaders, not just the top of the ticket, but all the way down the ballot. Those city council members, those state legislatures, especially those state legislatures, play a major role in our state's success, but also in being able to hold these larger institutions accountable and kind of show them a path forward of having a more sustainable future. And we've seen young people doing this day in and day out. I think Greta Thunberg is a prime example from 2016 and on, but there are so many more organizers and so many more folks who have been able to really merge that connection between inequality and climate justice. And we've seen the president take some steps in the right direction there. I think being able to create the Climate Corps, which not only created jobs, but is an institution that is now a part of our government that will help us potentially move that needle forward. And of course, listening to science. We're in an age where science and climate change is not real to one of the parties on the ticket. And that is horrifying. Because we are actively facing these crises, whether it's extreme storms or flooding or high housing prices, whatever it is, you name it. It's kind of one of those issues that touches all.
Thank you. I think when we think about climate, as you said, being from Florida and seeing what you are seeing in Florida and how things have progressed in Florida, how does that affect your day-to-day work and how you're in your advocacy? Because we've all kind of shared that we do this work for a personal thing, but you're seeing it in real time. How is that impacting how you see your work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think about it a lot. Going back to the first question, when it comes to economic opportunity and housing prices, we've seen homeowners insurance, Florida was kind of the first state to experience this extreme rise in homeowners insurance to the point where people can't even stay in their own homes. Or if they do, their homes aren't insured and a storm comes and your house is gone and now you're unhoused. And as the climate crisis has progressed and continued, we're seeing more states, I think it may have been a New York Times article a couple of months ago, but a few other states in the Midwest and in the South are starting to kind of recognize this, and we're starting to see this alarm of, oh wow, this climate crisis is now impacting my ability to own a home, to pay for my home day in and day out. And that is just one prime example of, kind of being on that bleeding edge, seeing the climate crisis, seeing, the shores that I grew up on and the beaches that I grew up on kind of wash away and constantly be rebuilt day in and day out. And absolutely, the climate is one of my primary motivating factors, but that's also because I care about the environment, and we have this country is incredible. Like, from the East Coast to the West Coast, north to the South, we have such a diverse climate and so many different ecosystems, and watching those disappear in real time in Florida has been a primary motivating factor for me to stay in this. Even when I am frustrated with candidates, I know that if I don't show up and if I don't participate, worse things are going to happen. And that is really what kind of pushes me forward, and what I hope is that we can find ways to connect these issues that we are facing and that these issues that motivate us and that we're passionate about to these elected offices, and not only hold our elected leaders accountable, but also demand leadership that will listen and keep our best interest in mind when it comes to crafting legislation, signing bills into law, and looking at our future.
Thank you. I think when you're watching the area that you grow in, that like you're accustomed to, and it's all of a sudden it's not there anymore. I grew up near a lake. My lake is now dried up, and it's going. The East Texas ponds are being taken down, and that's land and that's family, but also it's being replaced by oil fields, We have ozone days in Texas where you can't go outside. I have a younger brother with special needs. So I think that sometimes we do this work, but we do it from a personal place. And it is even more personal when you're watching it happen in real time, so thank you for that. Gonna switch gears to, we kind of talked about Project 2025. Again, I want to remind everyone, it's a 920-page document by the right-wing think tank, the Heritage Foundation, and other conservative organizations, because they have plenty of time on their hands, apparently. And it's calling for eliminating Social Security, eliminating the Department of Education, eliminating Medicare. There are just so many things that I could list. It attacks our reproductive freedom, but quite frankly, it attacks the 14th Amendment. But how do you believe, as grassroots activists, how can we counteract the threats of Project 2025 in order to protect our freedoms? And I would say we should be talking about what we're doing now, not what we will do then, because it's happening now.
I think, we'll start down here.
Oh God, sorry, I'll jump in.
No.
Yeah, I right back to the issues, I don't know if you all caught the Heritage Foundation, one of those dudes last week saying that it's all going according to plan. The SCOTUS immunity trial was step 1, 2, 3, or 5, I don't know, but that plan is already in process, and they are already doing everything that they can to be set up for success on day one, and making sure that we are able to amplify the issues, like what you were saying about abortion bans, banning access to IVF and abortion pills, eliminating Social Security, safety nets, Department of Education, the EPA is out. That is important, and making sure that people know that those issues are top of mind in Project 2025 and how we are going to combat that. I think, too, being able to point to hope and ways that we can combat that for a more prosperous future are essential. We can't, yes, fear-mongering is something that is part of this work, and unfortunately, I wish it wasn't. I wish we weren't constantly pointing to the other side and saying, look at how awful that is. But I think on the flip, it's also saying, look at how awful it is, and look at how hopeful and how much opportunity there is here, and look at our vision for a future and what we are trying to build towards, and making sure that people can see those comparisons side by side, because that is huge, especially when you're in a state, for example, that may not have access to abortion care right now. That, limiting abortion at a national level may not seem like it's going to change your life dramatically, but being able to see how one party is able to, or what one party is aspiring to do, and what we are trying to do in codifying Roe and making sure that everyone has access to reproductive care is essential. That disparity between the two and really showing the contrast between the two is essential.
Yeah, for me, one of the things that I really love about working with and alongside young people is their tremendous capacity to, use their imagination, right? And be willing to hold on to that hope and hold on to that spirit of possibility. I think for a lot of us that have been in the movement for a long time, it's really easy and rightfully earned to be really jaded, and we get really bogged down in the realistically, probably, right? We get so caught up in the pain and the hurt that we've already experienced, and the gift of youthfulness is not having that hurt, right? Obviously, young people are hurting and feeling things, but because they are coming to the movement with fresh eyes and enthusiasm, they are able to provide the energy that we need to sustain these movements. And I think too often we discount that, quote, lack of experience for a lack of understanding, when in fact, young people are deeply aware of the intricacies and the nuance of the world that we are existing in, because they are feeling the immediate impacts of it, right? I graduated from college in 2012, so the generation of, if you go to college, you will be successful, and then the unlearning of that, right? And that was brutal in and of itself. But the thought of graduating college right now, having gone through a pandemic, multiple genocides at one time, it overwhelms me. These are the things that take up my therapy sessions, right? That is terrifying. But then for these young people to still show up, and we see movements like the Fight for Our Lives, we see climate movements, we have watched Little Miss Flint grow up in front of us, right? And so for these young people to be showing up to these movements and these spaces with the enthusiasm of not only can we change this, but we have to and we will, is wildly inspiring. And then I'm I have to get over myself and get over my blunted outlook on things, because if these young people, in spite of everything that they are experiencing in real time, can show up loud and proud, then what am I doing, okay? And I think it's really tapping into that, highlighting that, and that's why we have to put young people in positions of leadership, in positions of power and authority to be able to drive these movements, because Lord knows I am tired, I wanna do my skincare routine, I wanna go to bed, and young people are but I've been watching Twitter, and here's what the people are saying, and I'm up on TikTok, and I know the things, and I'm out there talking to people, and I'm great, thank you so much. And so we have to, and we're seeing this, a prime example, right, is what is happening in our politics, of when people hold on to power for too long, when people hold on to the belief of, because I was needed then, I must be needed now, instead of of creating space for people to grow and pass the torch. Like the thing that held the civil rights movement together is that we had leaders across generations working alongside each other to teach each other and sustain the movement. And that is what I think a lot of our current movements are missing now, and the frustration and the angst that young people are feeling is they're like, but I'm showing up ready to do the things. Why are you guys gatekeeping? And so, again, coming back to we have to give young people, and we have to give people in general, something to be for, much more than something to be against. And it's a lot easier to have people in a space that not only are they welcomed, but was designed to support them. And foster their growth and their development and their desire to be leaders in the space.
Amen to all of that. I actually have, I have a question for you, because specifically in Project 2025, they are targeting, you've talked about movement, you've talked about protests, but they're talking about targeting and limiting speech and the impact that that will have. And I think it's because they know that the power of that. But I would love to hear your thoughts on, one, you've been on the Hill. You know how these things go. And I think there is a misconception that these things can't get through and they can't get passed. And when you know how the sausage is made, you know it absolutely can.
Yep.
But the second part of that is like the impact that this will have on our ability to do movement work.
Yep. Yep. What's required of us in response to Project 2025 and plans like it is to fight like hell with everything we've got, with the urgency that one might imagine they might have in a time of crisis. It's a time of crisis on multiple fronts. You name the issue. As it relates to movement, for example, we know that Trump's plans, that Republicans' plans, if they were to take over the Congress and the Oval Office, is clear. You can read what the House Education Committee and what the House Oversight Committee's plans are, especially as it relates to, for example, pro-Palestinian advocacy. They have plans for coming in and trying to take away nonprofit status for anybody who dares speak out about Palestine, trying to criminalize our advocacy around Palestine and every other issue we care about and love. On the issue of Palestine, their idea of how we deal with the current crisis is let's genocide faster. They want more killing to happen quicker so that the Israeli military and Netanyahu's murderous government can just get over with it quickly because it's kind of bad for PR. They want to fund the permanent annexation of the West Bank. They want to build luxury condos on Gaza Beach, colonize Gaza Beach to permanently already displaced Palestinians. The facts are horrific. It's also true that in order for us to fight like hell, we gotta make sure to study and take into account all of the different tentacles that a Project 2025 has. The right wing in this country, the fascist fringe, is not only operating in that fascist fringe, they're also trying to influence and take out our most ferocious, progressive, incredible leaders. The American Israeli Political Action Committee, AIPAC, is funded by right-wing billionaires. And you know who they're going after? They're going after black progressive leaders specifically. They just spent more money in an election in New York's 16th Congressional District to take out Congressman Jamal Bowman than ever has been spent in any congressional election in the history of our country. And they're about to spend more to take out my old boss, Congresswoman Cori Bush. The reason they're doing that isn't disconnected from Project 2025. They want to make sure that they take out our most courageous leaders, the leaders speaking out on Palestine, on racist policing, on environmental justice, speaking out like their life depends on it, because it does, because they come from that experience. And so our response to Project 2025 needs to be pushing back and also protecting our own and insisting from democratic leadership specifically that we not be silent when the right wing is picking and choosing who their opposition will be.
you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Protect our own. Amazing. I feel like I'm in church right now. It's really great. I even have the fan. Sorry, y'all. It's hot. I want to move on to our last question because we are running up on time. Finally, I know we've said a lot here today, but I would love to hear what you would like to say if you had an audience with any of the candidates today. And I want to direct our attention away just from what's at the top of the ticket and talk about who's down ballot, because they're all talky and chatty now. So I think, what would you like to say to them today? And what do you want them to know that their communities need to hear from them?
All right, sure. Listen, as a Leo, I'm never afraid to say something.
Yes, we will.
I think first and foremost, what I need electeds, candidates, people in decision-making positions to hear is that, especially as we move farther down the ballot, these elections are won and lost by a handful of people, right? So every single voter, every single constituent absolutely matters, and you have to treat them that way in an earnest and meaningful way. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, sure, there are reliable voting blocks. Hello, Black women. And also, we cannot do this by ourselves. I did not make this problem. I cannot solve this problem. And so what I need people, again, in those decision-making positions to understand is it is a collective effort, right? Capitalism, white supremacy, all of these things thrive on individualism and thrive on isolation. And so that means the antidote to that is community. It is collective action. It is the power of what happens when we come together around a common cause, a common person, a shared interest, right? And again, like I was saying earlier, the third thing would be is that those kids who are growing up in states that don't have science-based sex education, that don't have expansion on Medicare, their parents didn't have daycare that was funded, are turning 18 every single day. And I know they remember what happened, okay? So you can either welcome them with open arms and acknowledge their experiences, acknowledge the wisdom and the insight that they already have, and work with them to move us in a better, healthier, a direction of well-being, or you can let them go against you. The choice is really yours. I can't stress that enough. Don't say I didn't give you options. And so I say that to people who are seeking support and seeking, whether it's election, moving policy, whatever it is that you have to engage people in a meaningful way. Don't show up in September with a clipboard and expect me to do anything, all right? Because you should have been here in January. You should have stayed after November. Like that year-round investment. Again, white supremacy is extractionist, it is transactional, and we are looking for transformation, okay? And so I think the final thing, I'll land this plane because I know we're running low on time, is come correct or do not come at all. I'll leave it at that.
I can jump in. Yeah. So something that I think really stuck with me with some research that our team ran earlier this year is that the youngest block of voters, 18 and 19-year-olds, were between the ages of 10 and 12 when Biden was elected, or when Trump was elected?
2016.
Yes, 2016, when Trump was elected. They don't remember Trump. They don't know what the previous administration was like. And I think that is something that all candidates would benefit from being reminded by, that you can't just assume that young people are progressives and are gonna show up for you, because you vote blue no matter who. You need to, again, give them something to hope for, give them something to look forward to, and really focus on reflecting the values and the issues that are top of mind for those young people. I had something else to say, and it just disappeared, but really reminding folks that youngest block of voters needs a community, and they need to be brought into the fold and not just assumed that they are part of the progressive bloc, because the past couple of years have shown us that young people typically vote, on the left, and to really make that a concerted effort.
Since this is the last comment, I would love to take a moment to thank especially our moderator, Jara, for pulling this together and for your leadership. Thank you, Jara, for your wisdom, and thank you to Sarita and Emily, and to Sarita's therapist. I'm going to tell my therapist about your therapist tomorrow.
Joy's great.
That's right. Andrew will hear about Joy tomorrow. Shout out Andrew, honestly. Shout out to all our therapists.
Can we add therapy to workman's comp?
We can Ben in.
I mean, my message to any candidate, from the top of the ticket down would be like, I guess if we were to start at the top of the ticket, my question would be stop killing us. My ask would be stop killing us. In every way that policy violence shows up, it is killing so many of us, and we need to start there. My other grounding, anytime I'm engaging with elected officials, is the sage wisdom of Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, who reminds us that the people closest to the pain should be closest to the power, driving and informing the policy making. Yes. And so our questions to every one of the candidates running from the top of the ticket to the bottom of the ticket isn't necessarily have you experienced the pain yourself, but are you hearing us? Are you surrounding yourselves with people? Who's on your staff? Do you have people on your staff who've been impacted by the issues that you're looking to work with? Who are you consulting with? These are questions that we need to ask of our decision makers, of our elected policymakers, because we need policymakers up and down the ticket who prioritize investing in life over investing in harm.
Thank you all so much. I am honored and privileged to have been part of this conversation. I want to recognize my team at Supermajority who coordinated, communicated. One of them is here. Vanessa, say hi. I want to thank each of you, and please find out about and learn more about these organizations and get involved. I'm just going to close with this. I have closing remarks here, but I'm just going to flip the script and say what I feel like I need to say. Is that we're on the precipice of either something great, something mediocre, or something very terrible. And mediocre could be very terrible too. As a Black woman, I'm not allowed mediocrity. I wish I was. I would like to. But what we see and what we have in the conversation we had here, it comes down to this. It's not that people are saying, I don't vote. What they're saying is, you're not listening to me. So why should I listen to you? And I'm not just talking to our elected leaders and politicians and candidates, I'm talking to organizations. Because many of you, many activists, because I've experienced this, you come into a community, you ask a lot of questions, but you don't listen for any of the answers because you're too busy telling people how to feel rather than listening to how they feel and what their lives are like. And then you wonder why they say, I'm not interested, and they close the door. Because I wouldn't be interested in closing the door either. But I'm going to share with you an experience I had this weekend, this past weekend. I went to Philly, North Philly. Wonderful.
Let's go.
I was block walking, talking to people on stoops, and like eating my snow. I know y'all call it something else, but it was great. It was cherry, water ice. It was great. But as I was talking at doors, I met a woman who was 87 years old. And I sat on her stoop and we just had a conversation. And what I discovered is no one had gone to Miss Barrow's house. Her grandson lived there. They weren't even on our list. I saw other organizations just right past that house. I just happened to stop her on the stoop. So I made a point in that, I made a decision in that moment. I'm not going door to door, I'm going stoop to stoop. If anybody is outside, because that's what we have to do. The stakes are high, and if people are saying, I don't vote, this is the time to say we need to stop and listen, because they are watching what is happening. People who got active and engaged in 2020 watched as people completely forgot. They watched as affirmative action fell. They watched as college students are being denied their degrees, who were being thrown out of their schools for standing up for the right thing. They watched as women are having their rights taken away. They're watching as trans kids can't even go to school. They are seeing these things in real time, and the only thing we have to say to them is, well, you should do this. They know what should be done. They just need you to shut up and do it. So I would say, not only to our elected leaders, because I'm on camera, but I would say this to every organizational leader. If the people that are sitting with you look like you, you're doing it wrong. And I would say this to progressive space especially. If your first thought is not how can I support, but what are the stakes, you're doing it wrong. Because liberation collectively, Fannie Lou Hamer, who is my organizing model, said, when I liberate myself, I liberate you too. If we want to be liberated, we got to do it together. And with that, this panel is closed. Thank you all very much.